Let me tell you something that may seem counterintuitive. The more you explain yourself, the less people listen. The less you explain, the more they start to pay attention. We grow up thinking we have to justify everything. Why we made a decision, why we took that path, why we said no. We explain to avoid conflict. We explain to be liked. We explain because deep down we fear being misunderstood. But here's the truth. People don't respect explanations. They respect clarity. They respect conviction. We all want to be understood. It's natural. When we make a decision, take a new direction, or set a boundary, we feel this urge to explain ourselves. We think if we just give people enough information, they'll see things our way. They'll agree, support us, or at the very least, leave us alone. But more often than not, the opposite happens. The more we explain, the more we invite doubt. The more we justify, the more we appear unsure. And the more we talk, the less power our words seem to carry. When you over-explain, you unintentionally hand over your authority. You tell the world, I'm not quite confident enough to stand on this decision alone, so let me try to convince you. The problem with that is this: people respect clarity. They respect decisiveness, and they respond to conviction. But when you constantly explain yourself, you begin to erode the very authority you're trying to build. Think about the people you admire, leaders, mentors, or public figures. Do they over-explain? Probably not. They communicate clearly, but they don't feel the need to defend every choice they make. Their presence is rooted in confidence. They don't justify their values or beg for understanding. And because of that, we naturally lean in. We respect them, not because they convinced us, but because they were certain, calm, and grounded. Over-explaining often stems from fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of disappointing others, fear of being rejected. But in trying to explain ourselves into someone else's comfort zone, we step out of our own power. We shift the focus away from our purpose and onto other people's approval. And the moment we do that, we give them the authority that belongs to us. The truth is, explanation rarely changes minds. People often hear what they want to hear. If they already doubt your decision, no amount of reasoning will suddenly make them support it. And if they already respect you, they don't need the extra words. When you lead with self-assurance, people feel it. It communicates something deeper than logic. It communicates belief, and belief is what inspires others to follow. There's also a difference between communication and explanation. Communication is clear and intentional. You state your direction, your intent, or your decision, then you move forward. Explanation, especially when excessive, sounds like defense. It sounds like pleading. And when you start to sound like you're pleading, people stop listening to the message and start questioning the messenger. This doesn't mean you should be cold or closed off. It means you should speak with intention. Say what needs to be said, then let silence do the rest. Let your actions back up your words. Let your consistency reinforce your values. When you do this, you send a powerful message. I know who I am. I know where I'm going. And I don't need to be validated to stay the course. Ultimately, the less you explain, the more people listen, because restraint signals strength, and strength invites respect. The moment you stop explaining is the moment others start to lean in, not to challenge you, but to understand how they can rise to your level. That's how true authority is earned, not by over-explaining, but by standing firm in your truth. Clarity is a force. It's quiet, confident, and undeniable. In a world where people are constantly trying to be heard, clarity doesn't shout. It resonates. It doesn't try to convince. It simply states. And that, paradoxically, is what makes it so powerful. When someone speaks with clarity, there's no confusion about where they stand. You don't need 5 paragraphs of explanation or a list of justifications to understand their point. They say what they mean, and they mean what they say. That kind of certainty is magnetic because it's rare. Most people are uncertain, second, guessing themselves, constantly tweaking their words to please everyone. But clarity cuts through the noise. It doesn't bend or dilute itself for comfort. It stands tall in its simplicity. Explanation, on the other hand, often becomes a tool of overcompensation. When you're not sure if your message will be accepted, or when you're worried people might disagree, you start adding layers of reasoning. You try to soften the blow, hedge your stance, or cushion your truth with extra words. You begin explaining instead of simply stating. And in doing so, you unintentionally weaken your position. Because the more you explain, the more people sense your doubt. They don't just hear your words, they feel your energy. And if your energy isn't firm, your message won't land. The problem isn't that explanation is bad. Sometimes it's necessary, especially in situations where understanding is required for collaboration or progress. But too often we explain not to inform, but to defend. We feel the need to explain our boundaries, our dreams, our choices, as if their worth depends on someone else's approval. But clarity doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for agreement. It simply says, "This is what I believe. This is where I stand." And that level of directness doesn't push people away. It earns their respect. People are drawn to leaders who are clear, not just in what they say, but in how they show up. Clarity is felt in tone, in posture, in silence. It's the kind of quiet confidence that says, "I don't need to explain this to be understood. I need to live it to be respected." That's the real power. Because when you are clear about your values, your goals, your direction, your presence begins to speak louder than your words ever could. Clarity also simplifies your life. When you're clear on your boundaries, you don't get pulled into endless negotiations. When you're clear on your purpose, you don't waste energy chasing distractions. And when you're clear on your identity, you stop molding yourself to fit other people's expectations. You stop performing, you start living in alignment. That alignment creates consistency, and consistency builds trust. Whether it's in relationships, in leadership, or in personal growth, people trust what's clear more than what's clever. When you're clear, you don't fear silence. You don't rush to fill in the gaps. You let your message breathe. And that pause, that confidence to stop speaking, often speaks louder than another paragraph ever could. It tells the world, "I've said what I needed to say. Now you can process it however you need to." We live in a time where people are overwhelmed by noise. Everyone's talking. Few are saying anything worth hearing. That's why clarity is such a superpower. It doesn't add to the noise. It rises above it. It doesn't fight for space. It creates space, and in that space, real connection happens. So if you want to be heard, respected, and trusted, don't explain more, be more clear. Get quiet. Get grounded. Know what you stand for and stand in it. Because clarity doesn't just communicate a message. It communicates who you are. And that will always be more powerful than any explanation ever could be. Certainty is one of the most attractive traits a person can embody, not because it guarantees you're always right, but because it signals that you're rooted in something deeper than momentary opinions or shifting trends. When you carry yourself with certainty, people naturally take notice. They may not always agree with you, but they'll respect you. Because certainty isn't about arrogance or stubbornness. It's about clarity of values, purpose, and direction. Most people go through life unsure of what they believe, where they're headed, or what they stand for. They change depending on the room they're in, the opinions around them, or the pressure they feel. That kind of uncertainty isn't just felt, it's visible. It shows up in hesitation, in over-explaining, in seeking validation before making a move. And while it's normal to doubt yourself from time to time, living in a constant state of internal questioning causes others to question you too. Certainty, on the other hand, is magnetic. It doesn't mean you have all the answers. It means you're willing to move forward even without them. It means you trust yourself. You trust your judgment, your experience, and your instincts. And that kind of trust in self is what earns trust from others. When people see you standing firm in your truth, they begin to rely on you not just for answers, but for direction, for calm, for consistency. Think of any powerful leader, mentor, or figure you've looked up to. Chances are, it wasn't just their skills or knowledge that earned your respect. It was the way they carried themselves, the way they didn't flinch under pressure, the way they made decisions without needing to justify every detail. That certainty gave you confidence in them. You didn't need to understand everything. They made you feel like everything was under control. That's the quiet strength of people. Hear what you say, but they believe what you do. Words are easy. They can be rehearsed, polished, and packaged to sound convincing. But actions are raw, unfiltered truth. They reveal your real priorities, your true character, and your deepest convictions. No matter how well you explain yourself, if your actions don't align, people won't believe you. But if your actions are consistent, even without many words, people will begin to trust and respect you. We live in a world where explanations are everywhere. Everyone is trying to justify their choices, clarify their intentions, or defend their behavior. Social media, in particular, has turned us into broadcasters of reasoning. We feel the need to explain our every move, our every thought. But while words can create understanding, they rarely create impact. Impact comes from action, because people don't remember what you said as much as they remember what you did. When you show up consistently, when you follow through on your promises, when you make decisions that align with your values, that's when people pay attention. You don't need to convince them that you're committed. They'll see it in how you show up. You don't need to keep repeating that you're serious about your goals. They'll see it in the work you do, the sacrifices you make, and the consistency you maintain. On the flip side, if you constantly talk about change but continue living the same way, your words lose weight. If you say you value honesty but lie when it's convenient, people stop listening. If you say you're going to do something and don't follow through, no amount of explanation can fix the damage. Inconsistency between words and actions creates doubt, but alignment between them creates trust, and trust is the foundation of all respect. Think about leaders who inspire you not just because of what they say, but because of how they live. Their words are powerful not because they speak loudly, but because their actions back them up. They lead by example. They show discipline, integrity, and conviction, not in theory, but in how they move through the world. That's what earns them influence. That's what makes people follow them without needing a long speech. Even in your personal life, this principle holds. If you want to be respected by your friends, your family, your team, don't try to explain your intentions. Show up when it's inconvenient. Keep your word even when no one is watching. Do the right thing even when it costs you. That quiet consistency will speak louder than 1,000 explanations ever could. Action also has a unique ability to cut through doubt. When you act, you create momentum. And momentum builds belief not just in others, but in yourself. Every time you take action that aligns with your goals, your confidence grows. You stop trying to convince others and start becoming someone who no longer needs to. And that shift, from explanation to demonstration, is where true power lies. You don't have to speak louder to be heard. You just have to live louder. Let your life become the message. Let your consistency become the evidence. Let your integrity be what people remember long after your words fade. Because, in the end, people may listen to what you say, but they will believe what you do. And if you want to build lasting respect, influence, and credibility, stop explaining and start living in alignment with what you say you stand for. Let your actions speak. They always tell the truth. Certainty is one of the most powerful forms of influence a person can possess. It's not about being loud, forceful, or dominating. It's not even about always being right. True certainty is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and where you're going. People can feel it, and they're drawn to it, because in a world full of confusion and hesitation, certainty becomes rare and deeply attractive. Most people live in constant negotiation with themselves. They guess their decisions, ask for opinions before trusting their instincts, and alter their message based on who's in the room. That uncertainty creates a kind of energetic fog, and others can sense it. When someone isn't sure of themselves, it's difficult to be sure of them. The lack of inner clarity creates outer doubt. People don't know whether to trust what you say or wait for you to change your mind. That's why certainty stands out so strongly. It's sharp, it's defined, it feels grounded. Certainty doesn't mean you have all the answers. It simply means you've done the inner work to trust your judgment. You know your values, you know your priorities. You're not afraid to take a stand even if others disagree. That willingness to move forward without constant approval is what commands respect. People may question your position, but they will respect your clarity. They'll admire the way you hold your ground, not to dominate, but because you believe in something more than just being liked. Leadership, for example, is built on this principle. No one wants to follow someone who wavers at every decision or seeks validation before every move. They want to follow someone who says, "This is the way forward," and believes it. Even if that path changes, they trust the leader will handle it because they exude stability. That stability doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from being certain enough to move even in uncertainty. And that's a rare trait. In relationships, the same dynamic plays out. Certainty builds trust. When you know who you are, you don't send mixed signals. You don't say one thing and do another. You show up consistently because you aren't trying to figure yourself out through someone else's opinion. That self-assuredness creates emotional safety. Others don't feel like they need to read between the lines or prepare for emotional whiplash. They can relax into your presence because your certainty gives them confidence. Certainty also simplifies life. When you're certain about your boundaries, you're not exhausted by trying to please everyone. When you're certain about your path, you're not distracted by every shiny opportunity. You conserve energy, you eliminate unnecessary drama, you stop performing and start living authentically. And the world begins to respect you for that, even if they don't always understand you. It's important to recognize that certainty doesn't come from perfection. It comes from alignment. When your values, words, and actions are in harmony, you become certain. You may still have doubts, but they don't control you. You may face criticism, but it doesn't shake you. That inner conviction becomes your compass, and when others see you living from that place, they're drawn to it. Not because you're loud, but because you're sure. In the end, people may forget what you said or did, but they will always remember how they felt in your presence. If you can make them feel anchored, steady, and clear, if your certainty can cut through their internal chaos, they will respect you. Because respect isn't just earned through accomplishments, it's earned through character. And certainty is the clearest expression of character, the world can feel without needing to be told. Every time you explain yourself unnecessarily, you teach people to question you. It may seem like you're just being polite, transparent, or thoughtful, but in reality, over-explaining sends a subtle message. I'm not fully confident in this decision, and I need you to understand it before I can stand behind it. That message opens the door for others to challenge your choices, question your intentions, and debate your boundaries. Without realizing it, your desire to be understood becomes an invitation to be tested. When people sense that you need their approval to feel justified, they're more likely to push back. Not always out of malice, sometimes just out of habit or curiosity. But regardless of intent, the result is the same. Your authority weakens. The more you try to justify your position, the more it looks negotiable. What once could have been a clear boundary becomes a discussion point. What could have been a decisive direction becomes a debate, and the responsibility for your decisions quietly shifts from you to the people you're trying to convince. Explaining is often driven by a fear of being misunderstood. You don't want to come across as harsh, selfish, or inflexible. So you cushion your truth with layers of reasoning. You hope that if you explain yourself well enough, no one will feel hurt, confused, or disappointed. But here's the problem: the people who truly respect you don't need endless explanations. They understand your intent through your consistency. And the people who constantly demand justification usually aren't seeking understanding. They're seeking influence over your choices. The more you explain, the more people learn they can ask you to explain. It becomes a cycle. You set a boundary or make a decision, someone questions it, and you respond with an explanation. That person now sees that your lines aren't firm, they're flexible under pressure. The next time you set a boundary, they'll challenge it again. Not because they're being disrespectful, but because you taught them it's up for discussion. Of course, there are moments when explanation is necessary. In leadership, in teaching, or in nurturing relationships, clarity is important. But clarity is not the same as justification. You can communicate clearly without trying to defend yourself. You can state your direction without offering a backstory. And the more you do that, the more people learn to respect your word. It becomes clear, when you say something, it's not a request for feedback. It's a decision. People respect what is firm and consistent. They test what is uncertain. That's just human nature. It's not personal, it's psychological. If someone senses that your boundary is backed by emotional discomfort rather than personal conviction, they will keep pressing. But if your tone, posture, and presence say, "This is not up for discussion," they stop, not because they fear you, but because they understand you're certain. And certainty ends negotiation. Every time you explain a boundary, a standard, or a decision, ask yourself why. Are you doing it to offer clarity, or to avoid discomfort? Are you doing it to create understanding, or to avoid being misunderstood? If your explanation is driven by fear, it's not serving you, and it's not building the respect you deserve. You don't have to be rude, you don't have to shut people out, but you do have to stand firm. The less you explain, the clearer your standards become. And clarity builds confidence in you and in the people around you. Eventually, they stop challenging you, not because they gave up, but because they finally got the message. Your word stands on its own, and it doesn't need defending. Purpose is magnetic. When someone is living with unwavering intention, fully aligned with what they believe and where they're headed, it becomes impossible to ignore. People may not always agree with them, but they pay attention, because unapologetic purpose doesn't beg for approval. It doesn't adapt to please the room. It stands tall, speaks clearly, and moves forward without asking permission. And that, in a world full of hesitation and self-doubt, earns respect. There's something powerful about a person who knows why they do what they do. Not just on the surface, but at a deep internal level. Their purpose isn't borrowed or trendy, it's rooted in conviction. They don't have to sell you on their vision. They just live it every single day, and the consistency of that commitment creates trust. People respect what doesn't flinch, what doesn't sway with the opinions of others. Purpose that's unapologetic becomes a kind of silent authority. Most people try to gain respect by being agreeable, by explaining themselves, by making sure they're understood. But that often backfires. The more you seek approval, the more you signal that you need it. And the more people sense you need it, the less they offer it freely. But when you live with unapologetic purpose, you don't need to be validated. You validate yourself through your discipline, through your work, through your unwavering direction. Living this way doesn't mean you become rigid or closed-minded. It means you become rooted in values. Rooted in clarity, rooted in something bigger than comfort or image. When you're anchored like that, people notice. Because most are drifting, most are uncertain, and when someone walks into a room knowing exactly who they are and what they're about, it shifts the energy. It makes others question themselves, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because your presence reminds them what's possible when someone lives with purpose. There will always be critics. When you stop apologizing for who you are and what you stand for, it can make others uncomfortable, especially those who aren't living with the same level of clarity. But discomfort is not the enemy, compromise is. The moment you start watering down your purpose to make others more comfortable, you lose the very thing that earns you respect. People don't admire watered-down truth. They admire conviction, they admire courage, and those things can't coexist with apology. Purpose that's unapologetic also invites responsibility. It says, I know why I'm here, I know what I'm doing, and I'm willing to stand alone for it if I have to. That kind of accountability is rare, and rare things get noticed. You don't need to broadcast it. You don't need to justify it. You just live it with integrity, with consistency, with quiet confidence. When your purpose is clear and you stop apologizing for it, your life simplifies. You stop over-explaining your boundaries. You stop entertaining distractions. You stop trying to fit in where you were never meant to belong. Every no becomes easier, every yes becomes more powerful. You stop being reactive and start becoming intentional. That kind of living attracts respect not because you asked for it, but because you've earned it. In the end, people don't respect noise. They respect direction. They don't follow perfection. They follow presence. And nothing creates stronger presence than a person who is living their purpose without apology. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to be famous. You just have to be real and relentlessly committed to what matters most to you. That's what earns the kind of respect that doesn't fade.